Hey, welcome back to Adult Brain Audiobooks. I'm Graham, one of the narrators. I'm running late this morning, bit of a scramble, so sorry about that. But this is going to be an experimental live read of the 1801 book called the MAGUS, or Celestial Intelligencer, being a complete system of occult philosophy. It's basically like a history of magic type thing. Um, we are reading today some of the alchemy portion, so that would be the middle of alchemy, where the lessons start, kind of like towards the end of book one or the middle of book one, I guess, and then there's a whole book two after this. So we will just jump into it. I'm just doing this raw edit as I go, so this isn't like polished or anything. It's just an experiment to show you that this is how the sausage is made here. Um, we are humans, and this is real work. Let's see here. So I'm just gonna just do a quick test. I'm gonna share my screen with my audio software and the PDF that I'm reading this from, and we'll go from there. Here we are, the lessons. This is where we're starting. So we finished this other part of the early alchemy in the book here. And let me just make sure this is all working here. I'm going to continue on the recording from last time, and then I'm going to separate that out and start a new one when we get to part two here. So, of the preparation of a man to qualify him for the search of this treasure, and of the first matter, Prima Materia, of the stone. Lesson 1. The preparation for this work is simply this: learn to cast away. Gotta redo that quickly. The prep. The preparation for this work is simply this: learn to cast away from thee all vile affections, all levity and inconstancy of mind. Let all thy dealings be free from deceit and hypocrisy. Avoid the company of vain young men. Hate all profligacy and profane speaking. Lesson 2. Keep thy own and thy neighbor's secrets. Court not the favors of the rich. Despise not the poor, for he who does will be poorest. Let me just redo that quickly. Let me make sure this record level is going to stay above 44 or so. This is interesting. This reminds me of some other stuff I'll talk about in a sec here. Despise not the poor, for he who does will be poorer than the poorest. Lesson 3. Give to the needy and unfortunate what little thou canst spare, for he that has but little, whatever he spares to the miserable, God shall amply reward him. Lesson 4. Be merciful to those who attend. Be merciful to those who offend thee or have injured thee. For what must that man's heart be who would take heavy vengeance on a slight offense? Thou shalt forgive thy brother until 70 times 7. Lesson 5. Be not hasty to condemn the action of others, lest thou shouldest the next hour fall into the very same error. Despise scandal and tattling. Let thy words be few. Lesson 6. Study day and night and supplicate thy Creator that he would be pleased to grant thee knowledge and understanding, and that the pure spirits may have communication with and influence in thee. I just want to make a comment here, not that, this is about me commenting, but this reminds me of some of the uh the works of like Manly P. Hall and Blavatsky and all that when they talk about initiation and being like what it takes to become an adept, like that you need some of these real like basic spiritual lessons, like this is like spirituality 101 in a way, like, don't get offended, be good to everybody, be not hasty to condemn others. Like it's so when people think all this stuff is evil, like, yeah, sure, it can be used for evil, but this is an old book from 1801 that's talking about like the lessons to become an alchemist, basically. And it's talking about this purity that you should obtain. So, people you shouldn't be able to look at this and say, oh, this is all evil. I mean, I'm not finished yet, so maybe it'll get worse as we go on here, but influence in thee. from all I've read on becoming, and initiated in a society, like this is kind of very similar. It's like you got to just take care of your own side of the street, like be strong spiritually and emotionally and physically too. It's very interesting. No, I forgot where I was. And influence. Okay, so lesson 7. Scroll up here while I can. Lesson 7. Be not overcome with drunkenness, for he assured that half the evils that befall mankind originate in drunkenness. For too great a quantity of strong liquors deprive man of their reason. Then, having lost the use of the faculty of their judgment, they immediately become the recipient of all evil influences, and are justly compared to weathercocks that are driven hither and thither by every gust of wind. So those who drown the reasonable power and easily persuaded to the lightest and most frivolous pursuits, and from these to vices more gross and reprobate. For the ministers of darkness have never so favorable an opportunity of insinuating themselves into the minds and hearts of men as when they are lost in intoxication. I pray you to avoid this dreadful vice. Lesson 8. Avoid gluttony and all excess. It is very pernicious, and from the devil these are the very things that constancy. That was wrong. Let me redo that one. It is very interesting, too, that a lot of these are like biblical. It is very pernicious, and from the devil these are the things that constantly tempt man, and by which he falls a prey to his spiritual adversary. For he is rendered incapable of receiving any good or divine gift. Besides, the divine and angelic powers or essences delight not to be conversant about a man who is defiled and stinking with debauchery and excess. Lesson 9. Covet not much gold, but learn to be satisfied with enough, for to desire more than enough is to offend the deity. Lesson 10. Read often these 10 preparatory lessons to fit thee for the great work, and for the receiving of higher things. For the more pure thou art in heart and mind, by so much quicker shall you perceive these high secrets we teach, and which are entirely hid from the discernment of the vicious and depraved, because it never can happen that such a source of treasure can be attained merely to satisfy our more gross, earthly, and vain desires and inclinations, because here nothing must be thought to be grasped or wrested out of this book, but to the fulfilling of a good end and purpose. When thou shalt have so far purified thy heart, as we have spoken in indispensably necessary for the receiving of every good thing, thou shalt then see with other eyes, and thou dost at present. Thy spiritual eye will be opened, and thou shalt read man as plain as thou wilt our books. But for all this, depend not on the strength of thy own wisdom, for even then, when we think our hearts secure, if we do not watch them that they sleep not, the devil or his ministers immediately take us at this unguarded moment and tempts us into the actual commission of some sin or other. Either he excites our appetite for lust and concupiscence, or any other deadly sin. Therefore, using our blessed Redeemer's words, what I say unto you all, watch. Perhaps I do not doubt, but there are some that will say, when they look at our works, this fellow is all rant, all preaching. He tells us what we knew before as well as himself. To such I say, let them read our book but twice, if they do not gather something that they will acknowledge precious, nay, be convinced that it is precious to their own satisfaction. I will burn these writings, and they shall be no more remembered by me. To conclude this part, we say that the first matter, Prima Materia, Adam brought with him out of paradise, and left it as an inheritance to his successors, to us, his successors. I'm just going to redo that quickly. To conclude this part, we say that the Bonjour, no comprehende. We say that the first matter, oh no, this is, yeah, that is right. We say that the first matter, prima materia, Adam brought with him out of paradise and left it as an inheritance to us, his ancestors. Oops, his successors. Thanks, Lazarus. Yeah, try in English. I can read a little bit of French and stuff and speak a tiny, tiny, tiny bit. I used to when I was younger, but if that is French, I think it is, yeah. We say that the first matter, prima materia, Adam brought with him out of paradise and left it as an inheritance to us, his successors. Had he remained in his original purity, he would have been permitted to have used it himself. But the eternal fiat was passed that he was to earn his bread by the sweat of his brow. Therefore, he could not effect what was afterwards performed by some of his offspring. Hermes Trismegistus, that ancient philosopher, wrote touching the attainment of this stone, which he pronounced to be of all benefit to man, and one of the greatest blessings he could possess. And although his writings contain much of the excellency of truth, being wrapped up in such symbolical figures, it renders them exceedingly difficult to be understood. Yet, if comprehended, they no doubt contain some very great secrets by which mortal man may profit. Now, it belongs to our purpose to know what it is from which we must extract the first matter of this stone, to go on with our process, because we must have materials to work upon. For all philosophers agree that, the first matter being found, we may proceed without much difficulty. For the first, excuse me. So Lazaret says, God is prompt to recompense who hate him, for more damn them after. Interesting. For the first matter, I shall speak as plainly as possible. First, the grand question in debate is, where is it to be found? I say it is to be found in ourselves. We all possess this first matter, from the beggar to the king. Every mother's son carries it about him, and could our ingenious chemists but find a process for the extracting, how well would all their labors be repaid? The next question naturally comes to us. How are we to draw or attract the secret matter of the stone out of ourselves? Not by any common means, and yet is not by. Let me try that again. Not by any common means, and in a manner. Oh, I lost my place there. This is it's a long paragraphs here. Let's see. Not by any common means, and yet it is to be drawn into every action, and that by the most simple means, and in a manner that the attaining of the philosopher's stone would be very soon follow it. I'm going to leave that. I pray you, my friend, look into yourself. I pray you, my friend, look into thyself and endeavor to find out in what part of thy composition is the prima materia of the Lapis Philosophorum, or out of what part of thy substance can the first matter of our stone be drawn out. Thou sayest, it must either be in the hair, sweat, or excrement. I say in none of these thou shalt ever be able to find it, and yet thou shalt find it in thyself. Many great philosophers and chemists whom I have the pleasure to know affirm that, admitting of the possibility of transmutation, it, i.e., the first matter, must be taken from the purest gold. To this I say it must not, neither has it anything at all to do with extrinsical gold. They will say that the pure ends of gold may be drawn from gold itself. True, it may so, but then I would ask if they could ever produce more gold than that out of which the soul or essence was extracted. If they have indeed found out a secret beyond the powers of our comprehension, because it is against reason to suppose that if a pound of gold yields a drachm of the soul or essence, that the only will that that the that only will drachma. I think I'm going to redo that quickly because that was sort of drachma, not drachm. I'll go right from there. Drachm. Because it is against reason to suppose that if a pound of gold yields a drachma, because it is against reason to suppose that if a pound of gold yields a drachma of the soul or essence, that only will tinge any more than a pound of purified lead, or because we have tried various experiments and I have in some of my first essays turned both lead and mercury into good gold, but no more than that out of which the soul was extracted. But, however, not to lose our time in vain and ridiculous disputation, know that whatever prodigious things are experiments have been tried with respect to the first matter by external subjects, either in the mineral, animal, or vegetable kingdoms, as they are called, I say in us is the power of all wonderful things, which the Supreme Creator has, of his infinite mercy, implanted in our souls. Out of her is to be extracted the first matter, the true argent vive, the of the philosopher's stone, the true ends of question, viz., a spiritual living gold, or waterish mercury, or first matter, which by being matured, which by matured, which by being matured is capable of transmuting 1,000 pints of pure impure, which by being impurted, which by being matured is capable of transmuting 1,000 pints of impure metal into gold. Good. And I'm not gonna get. Okay, I got to get this right here. Which by being matured is capable of transmuting 1,000 pints of impure metal into good and perfect gold, which endure fire, test, or cupel. Okay, I'm just gonna start a new one here as I go into part 2. Lazarette says the philosopher's stone for me is the knowledge of the self about transformation from an image to the original. That's my view of God, if I can say. Wow, I like that. That's good. That's awesome. Yeah, from what I've heard of alchemy, like your intention is the most important part. Like that has to be there. So if you don't have knowledge of self, maybe you can't get there. And that's kind of like spiritual alchemy, right? To get that knowledge of self, peel away all the fake and false layers to get to your core through transmuting the emotions in the centers of your body. Okay, now my cat is pushing the screen. I got to just fix that before I continue. Okay, so we're going to continue on in part 2 here with the lessons. Excuse me. Check. Part 2 of the manner of extracting the first matter of the philosopher's stone, and the use it is to put to in putrefying. That was bad. I'm going to just redo that whole thing. Purifying the imperfect metals. Putrefying. Let me pull this up a little bit, see if it'll stay up there a little bit. Part 2 of the manner of extracting the first matter of the philosopher's stone, and the use it is put. Part 2 of the manner of extracting the first matter of the philosopher's stone, and the use it is put to in purifying the imperfect metals and transmuting them into good gold. Lesson 11. Take the foregoing instructions as thy principal instrument, and know that our soul has the power, when the body is free, as we before said, of any pollution, the heart void of malice and offense. I say the soul is then a free agent and has the power spiritually and magically to act upon any matter whatsoever. Therefore, I said the first matter is in the soul, and the extracting of it is to bring the dormant power of the pure living, breathing spirit and eternal soul into act. Note well that every agent has its power of acting upon its patient. Every essence that is distilled forth is received into a recipient, but that recipient must first be made clean. Even so must the soul and heart of man. Just going to pull this up here. Scroll up. The vile affections must be thrown away and trampled underfoot. Then shalt thou be able to proceed in thy work, which do in the manner following. Lesson 12. The expense thou must be at will be but a trifle. All the instruments necessary are but three, viz., a crucible, an egg, philosophical, and a retort with its receiver. Put your fine gold in weight about 5 DWTS. What is DWTS? Do I have to? I should probably just quickly check on that. Oh my God. It's a weight. It would be a weight, or it is a volume or weight, right? You're not going to believe what answer it gave me. My assistant gave me. Dancing with the Stars. I mean, come on. Dancing with the Stars. It is in weight about 5 Dancing with the Stars. Pennyweights. All right. DWTS. Oh my God. Come on. Pennyweight. All right. So pennyweight. Put your fine gold in weight about 5. All right. Here we go. Put your fine gold in weight about 5 penny. What was it? Penny what? Pennyweights? Pennyweight? Oh my God, I'm so stupid this morning. Pennyweights. Okay. Check. Put your fine gold in weight about 5 pennyweights. File it up. Put it into your philosophic egg. Pour upon it twice of its weight of the best Hungarian question. They're not going to give us the actual answers here. They're going to be symbolically leaving some parts out here. Close up the egg with a hermetic seal. Put it for 3 months in horse dung. Take it out at the end of that time and see what kind of form thy gold and question mark has assumed. Take it out. Pour it on half its weight of good spirit of salamon. Let them in a pot full of sand over the fire in the retort. Let them distill into a pure essence and of let them. I'm going to cheat. Go halfway through the sentence here. Let them distill into a pure essence. Add to 1 pint of this part, 1 part of this, probably. Let them distill into a pure essence and add 1 part of this question mark, 2 parts of thy water of life or Prima Materia. Put them into thy philosophical egg. And lesson 13, set them into horse dung for another 3 months. Then take them out and see what thou hast. A pure ethereal essence, which is the living gold. Pour this pure spiritual liquor upon a drachm of molten fine gold, and you will find that which will satisfy thy hunger and thirsting after this secret. For the increase of thy gold will seem to thee miraculous, as indeed it is. Take it to a jeweler's or goldsmith's. Let them try it in thy presence, and thou wilt have reason to bless God for his mercy to thee. Do thy duty as he has commanded thee, and use all the benefit thou shalt receive in actions worthy of thy nature. Lesson 14. When thy spiritual eye is opened, and thou shalt begin to see to what end thou wert created, thou shalt want no necessary thing either for thy comfort or support. Only keep in the rules we have prescribed in the beginning of this little treatise. Fear God and love thy neighbor as thyself. Be not hasty to reveal any secrets thou mayest learn, for the good spirits, both day and night, will be thy instructors, and will continually reveal thee many secrets. Think not thou canst either profit nor benefit so much from the instruction of those who profess great advantages in classical education and high schooling. Be assured they are in spiritual knowledge much in the dark, for he who desires not spiritual knowledge cannot attain by it any means, but first, I'm going to redo that one quickly. Be assured. For he who, there, I could do it from there. For he who desires not. For he who desires not spiritual knowledge cannot attain it by any means, but by first coming to God. Secondly, by purifying his own heart. Thirdly, by submitting himself to the will of the Holy Spirit, to guide and direct him in all truth, to the attaining of all knowledge, both human and divine, and by arrogating nothing to our own power or strength, but by referring all to the mercy and goodness of God. Amen. Okay, so this is it's weird how this book is set up. I'm gonna try and figure out in my head here. B Hart says, "Victory to the divine healing love and light. We are all one." Sure. So this is still kind of part two of the book, but I don't know why they split the lessons up, or maybe it's just part two of the lessons, and now this is actually the second part of chapter or book one. So I think I will just edit this later, and I'll read this. Oh, he who desires. Oh shit! What did I just do there? Amen. I will. I'm going to read out this whole title page. Actually, no, I don't need to read this whole title page. Part the second, chapter 1, of the four elements and their natural qualities. It is necessary that we should know and understand the nature and quality of the four elements in order to our being perfect in the principles and groundwork of our studies in the talismanic or magical art. Therefore, there are four elements, the original grounds of all corporeal things, viz., fire, earth, water, and air, of which elements are all inferior bodies. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to cheat and split that up there instead of rereading the whole thing. Excuse me. Of which elements all inferior bodies are compounded, not by way of being heaped up together, but by transmutation and union. And when they are destroyed, they are resolved into elements. But there are none of these sensible elements that they. Okay, this is going to be hard to see. This paragraph is so big. Try to do my best here. But there are none of these sensible elements that are pure, but they are more or less mixed and apt to be changed the one into the other, even as earth being moistened and dissolved becomes water, but the same being made thick and hard becomes earth again, and being evaporated through heat it passes into air. and that being kindled into fire, and this being extinguished into air again, but being cooled after burning becomes earth again, or else stone or sulfur. And this is clearly demonstrated by lightning. Now, every one of these elements have two specific properties, the former whereof it retains as proper to itself, and the other, as a mean, it agrees with that which comes directly after it. For fire is hot and dry, earth cold and dry, water cold and moist, and air hot and moist. And so, in this manner, the elements, according to two contrary qualities, are opposite one to the other, as fire to water and earth to air. Likewise, the elements are contrary one to the other on another account. Two are heavy, as earth and water, and the others are light, as fire and air. Therefore, the Stoics called the former passive, but the latter actives. And Plato distinguishes them after another manner, and assigns to each of them three qualities, viz., to the fire, brightness, thinness, and motion; to the earth, darkness, thickness, and quietness. And according to these qualities, the elements of fire and earth are contrary. Now, the other elements borrow their qualities from these, so that the air receives two qualities from the fire, thinness and motion, and the earth one, viz., darkness. In like manner, water receives two qualities of the earth, darkness and thickness, and the fire one, viz., motion. But fire is twice as thin as air, thrice more movable, and four times brighter. The air is twice more bright, thrice more thin, and four times more movable. Therefore, as fire is to air, so is air to water, and water to the earth. And again, as the earth is to the water, so is water to air, and air to fire. And this is the root and foundation of all bodies, natures, and wonderful works. And he who can know and thoroughly understand these qualities of the elements and their mixtures shall bring to pass wonderful and astonishing things in magic. Now, each of these elements have a threefold consideration, so that the number of 4 may make up the number of 12, and by passing by the number of 7 into 10, there may be a progress to the supreme unity upon which all virtue and wonderful things do depend. Of the first order are the pure elements, which are neither compounded, changed, or mixed, but are incorruptible, and not of which, but through which, the virtues of all natural things are brought forth to act. No man be able. Let me just redo that quickly. Check. No man is able fully to declare their virtues, because they can do all things upon all things. He who remains ignorant of these shall never be able to bring to pass any wonderful matter. Of the second order are elements that are compounded, changeable, and impure, yet such as may by art be reduced to their pure simplicity, whose virtue, when they are thus reduced, doth, above all things, perfect all occult and common operations of nature. And these are the foundation of the whole of natural magic. Of the third order are those elements which originally and of themselves are not elements, but are twice compounded, various and changeable into another. These are the infallible medium, and are called the middle nature, or soul of the middle nature. Very few there are that understand the deep mysteries thereof. In them is, by means of certain numbers, degrees, and orders, the perfection of every effect in what thing soever, whether natural, celestial, or supercelestial. They are full of wonders and mysteries, and are operative as in magic natural, so divine. For from these, through them, proceeds the binding, loosing, and transmutation of all things, the knowledge of the knowledge and foretelling of things to come, also the expelling of evil and the gaining of good spirits. Let no one, therefore, without these three sorts of elements, and the true knowledge thereof, be confident that he can work anything in the occult science of magic and nature. But whosoever shall know how to reduce those of one order into another, impure into pure, compounded into simple, and shall understand distinctly the nature, virtue, and power of them, in number, degrees, and order, without dividing the substance, He shall easily attain to the knowledge and perfect operation of all natural things, and celestial secrets likewise. And this is the perfection of the Kabbalah, which teaches all these before mentioned. And by a perfect knowledge thereof, we perform many rare and wonderful experiments. Chapter 2 of the properties and wonderful nature of fire and earth. There are two things, says Hermes, viz., fire and earth, which are sufficient for the operation of all wonderful things. The former is active and the latter passive. Fire in all things and through all things comes and goes away bright. It is in all things bright, and at the same time occult and unknown. When it is by itself, no other matter coming to it in which it should manifest its proper action, it is boundless and invisible, of itself sufficient for every action that is proper to it. Itself is one and penetrates through all things, also spread abroad in the heavens and shining. But in the infernal space, infernal place, let me redo that quickly. But in the infernal place, straitened, dark, and tormenting, and in the midway it partakes of both. It is in stones, and is drawn out by the stroke of the steel. It is in earth, and causes it, after digging up, to smoke. It is in water, and heats springs and wells. It is in the depths of the sea, and causes it, being tossed with the winds, to be hot. It is in the air, and makes it, as we often see, to burn. And all animals and all living things whatsoever, as also vegetables, are preserved by heat. And everything that lives, lives by reason of the enclosed heat. The properties of the fire that is above are heat, making all things fruitful, and a celestial light giving life to all things. The properties of the infernal fire are a parching heat, consuming all things, and darkness, making all things barren. The celestial and bright fire drives away spirits of darkness. Also, this our fire made with wood drives away the same, inasmuch as it hath an analogy with, and is the vehiculum of that superior light, as also of him who saith, I am the light of the world, which is true fire, the fire of lights, from whom every good thing that is given comes, sending forth the light of his fire, and communicating it first to the sun and the rest of the celestial bodies, and by these, as by mediating instruments, conveying that light into our fire. As therefore the spirits of darkness are stronger in the dark, so good spirits, which are angels of light, are augmented not only by that light, which is divine of the sun and celestial, but also by the light of our common fire. Hence it was that the first and most wise institutors of religions and ceremonies ordained that prayers, singings, and all manner of divine worships whatsoever should not be performed without lighted candles or torches. Hence also was that significant saying of Pythagoras, do not speak of God without a light. And they commanded that for the driving away of wicked spirits, lights and fires should be kindled by the carcasses of the dead, that they should not be removed until the expiations were, after a holy manner, performed, and then buried. And the great Jehovah himself, in the old law, commanded that all his sacrifices should be offered with fire, and that fire should always be burning upon the altar, which custom the priests of the altar did always observe and keep amongst the Romans. Now, the basis and foundation of all the elements is the earth, for that is the object, subject, and receptacle. Good morning, Bhutan. For that is the. Let's see where I was here. Receptacle. Okay, I'm going to take this moment at the mistake to scroll up all the way. I think I'm going to read the footnotes too, but I just got to see here where the receptacle is. I lost my place. The Romans, right? The Romans. Is the earth. For that is the object, receptacle. Where am I? For that is the object, subject, and receptacle of all celestial rays and influences. In it are contained the seeds and seminal virtues of all things, and therefore it is said to be animal, vegetable, and mineral. It, being made fruitful by the other elements in the heavens, brings forth all things of itself. It receives the abundance of all things, and is, as it were, the first fountain from whence all things spring. It is the center, foundation, and mother of all things. Take as much of it as you please, separated, washed, depurated, and subtilized. And if you will let it lie in the open air a little while, it will, being full and abounding with heavenly virtues, of itself bring forth plants, worms, and other living things, also stones and bright sparks of metals. In it are great secrets. If at any time it shall be purified by the help of fire and reduced into its simple nature by a convenient washing, it is the first matter of our creation, and the truest medicine that can restore and preserve us. Footnotes. Agrippa here speaking of the element of earth being reduced to its utmost simplicity by being purified by fire in a convenient washing means that it is the first and principal ingredient necessary to the production of the philosopher's stone, either of animals or metals. Chapter 3. Of the water and air. The other two elements, viz., water and air, are not less efficacious than the former. Neither is nature wanting to work wonderful things in them. There is so great a necessity of water that without it nothing can live. No herb nor plant whatsoever without the moistening of water can bring forth. In it is the seminary virtue of all things, especially of animals, whose seed is manifestly waterish. The seeds also of trees and plants, although they are earthy, must, notwithstanding of necessity, be rotted in water before they can be fruitful. I got to redo that quickly. That's a pretty bad mistake. Should be right here. The seeds also of trees and plants, although they are earthy, must, notwithstanding of necessity, be rotted in water before they can be fruitful. Whether they be just to double check that. This is 40%. That's pretty low. I don't know. It's got to come up a bit. Whether they be imbibed with the moisture of the earth or with dew or rain or any other water, that is on purpose put to them. For Moses writes that only earth and water can bring forth a living soul, but he ascribes a twofold production of things to water, viz., of things swimming in the water and of things flying in the air above the earth, and that those productions that are made in and upon the earth are partly attributed to the very water the same scripture testifies, where it saith that the plants and the herbs did not grow, because God had not cursed it to rain upon the earth. That was a mistake. Caused it. I'm going to cheat that sentence that the plants and the herbs did not grow because God had not caused it to rain upon the earth. Such is the efficacy of this element of water, that spiritual regeneration cannot be done without it, as Christ himself testified to Nicodemus. Very great also is the virtue of it in the religious worship of God, in expiations and purifications. Indeed, the necessity of it is no less than that of fire. Infinite are the benefits and diverse are the uses thereof, as being that, by virtue of which all things subsist, are generated, nourished, and increased. Hence it was that Thales of Miletus and Hesiod concluded that water was the beginning of all things, and said it was the first of all elements, and the most potent, and that because it hath the mastery over all the rest, for as Pliny saith, waters swallow up the earth, extinguish flames, ascend on high, and by the stretching forth of the clouds challenge the heavens for their own. The same falling down becomes the cause of all things that grow in the earth. Very many are the wonders that are done by waters, according to the writings of Pliny, Solinus, and many other historians. Josephus also makes relation to the wonderful nature of a certain river betwixt Arcia and Raphania, cities of Syria, which runs with a full channel all the Sabbath day, and then on a sudden stops as if the springs were stopped. And all the 6 days you may pass over it dry shod. But again, on the seventh day, no man knowing the reason of it, the waters return again, in abundance as before. Wherefore the inhabitants there called it the Sabbath day river, because of the seventh day, which was holy to the Jews. The gospel also testifies of a sheep pool, into which whosoever stepped first after the water was troubled by the angel, was made whole of whatsoever displease he had. That was a mistake. I better redo that. Disease. And that record level just keeps dropping. I don't know what's going on with that. I hope that's okay. The gospel also testifies of a sheep pool, into which whosoever stepped first after the water was troubled by the angel, was made whole of whatsoever displease he had. I'm gonna have to redo that whole thing. Sorry about that. Yeah, I don't know. Usually it stays around 44, 45, which seems fine for the. Oh, now it just jumped up to 91. So what is going on with that? Okay. Hmm. The gospel also testifies of a sheep pool, into which whosoever stepped first after the water was troubled by the angel was made whole of whatsoever disease he had. The same virtue and efficacy, we read, was in a spring of the Ionian nymphs, which was in the territories belonging to the town of Elis, at a village called Heradia, near the river Cithaeron, which whosoever stepped into, being diseased, came forth whole and cured of all his diseases. Pausanias also reports that in Lycius, a mountain of Arcadia, there was a spring called Agria, to which, as often as the dryness of the region threatened the destruction of fruits, Jupiter, priest of Lycius, went, and after the offering of sacrifices, devoutly praying to the waters of the spring, holding a bough of oak in his hand, put it down to the bottom of the hallowed spring. Then the waters being troubled, a vapor ascending from thence into the air was blown into the clouds, which being joined together, the whole heaven was overspread, which being a little after dissolved into rain, watered all the country most wholesomely. Moreover, Rufus, a physician of Ephesus, besides many other authors, wrote strange things concerning the wonders of water, which, for aught I know, are found in no other author. It remains that I speak of the air. This is a vital spirit passing through all beings, given life and subsistence to all things, moving and filling all things. Hence it is that the Hebrew doctors reckon it not amongst the elements, but count it as a medium or glue joining things together, and as the resounding spirit of the world's instrument. It immediately receives it to itself. Let me just redo that quickly. Scroll up while I can. It immediately receives into itself the influence of all celestial bodies, and then communicates them to the other elements, as also to all mixed bodies. Also, it receives into itself, as if it were a divine looking glass, the species of all things, as well natural as artificial, as also of all manner of speeches, and retains them, and carrying them with it, and entering into the bodies of men and other animals through their pores, makes an impression upon them, as well when they are asleep as when they are awake, and affords matter for divers strange dreams and divinations. Hence they say it is that a man passing by a place where a man was slain, or the carcass newly hid, is moved with fear and dread, because the air in that place, being full of the dreadful species of manslaughter, doth, being breathed in, move and trouble the spirit of the man with the like species. Whence it is that he becomes afraid. For everything that makes a sudden impression astonishes nature, Whence it is that many philosophers were of opinion that air is the cause of dreams and of many other impressions of the mind, through the prolonging of images, of similitudes or species, which proceed from things and speeches multiplied in the very air, until they come to the senses, and then to the fantasy and soul of him that receives them, which being freed from cares and no way hindered, expecting to meet such kind of species, is informed by them. For the species of things, although of their own proper nature they are carried to the senses of men, and other animals in general may notwithstanding get some impression from the heavens whilst they are in the air, by reason of which, together with the aptness and disposition of him that receives them, they may be carried to the sense. Let me just redo that quickly. Hmm. Long sentences. By reason of which, I think I can cheat this one. Yeah, by reason of which, together, there we go. Get a drink here. Check. By reason of which, together with the aptness and disposition of him that receives them, they may be carried to the sense of one rather than of another. And hence it is possible naturally, and far from all manner of superstition, no other spirit coming between, that a man should be able in a very small time to signify his mind unto another man, abiding at a very long and unknown distance from him, although he cannot precisely give an estimate of the time when it is, yet, of necessity, it must be within 24 hours. And I myself know how to do it, and have often done it. The same also in time past did the abbot Tritemius both know and do. Also, when certain appearances, not only spiritual but also natural, do flow forth from things, that is to say, by a certain kind of flowings forth of bodies from bodies, and do gather strength in the air, they shew themselves to us as well through light as motion, as well to the sight as to other senses, and sometimes work wonderful things upon us, as Plotinus proves and teacheth, as we see how by the south wind the air is condensed into thin clouds, in which, as in a looking glass, are reflected representations at a great distance of castles, mountains, horses, men, and other things, which when the clouds are gone presently vanish. And Aristotle in his Meteors shews that a rainbow is conceived in a cloud of the air as in a looking glass. And Albertus says that the effigies of bodies may, by the strength of nature, in a moist air be easily represented, in the same manner as the representations of things are in things. And Aristotle tells of a man to whom it happened, by reason of the weakness of his sight, that the air that was near to him became, as it were, a looking glass to him, and the optic beam did reflect back himself, and could not penetrate the air, so that whithersoever he went, he thought he saw his own image, with his face towards him, go before him. In like manner, by the artificialness of some certain looking glasses, may be produced at a distance in the air besides the looking glasses, what images we please, which when ignorant men see, they think they see the appearances of spirits or souls, when indeed they are nothing else but semblances akin to themselves and without life. And it is well known, if in a dark place, where there is no light but the coming in of a beam of the sun somewhere through a little hole, a white paper or plain looking glass be set up against the light, that there may be seen upon them whatsoever things are done without, being shined upon the sun. And there is another sleight or trick yet more wonderful. If anyone shall take images artificially painted or written letters, and in a clear night set them against the beams of the full moon, those resemblances being multiplied in the air and caught upward and reflected back together with the beams of the moon, another man that is privy to the thing at a long distance sees, reads, and knows them in the very compass and circle of the moon, which art of declaring secrets is, indeed, very profitable for towns and cities that are besieged. being a thing which Pythagoras long since did and which is not unknown to some in these days, I will not accept myself. And all these things and many more, and much greater than these, are grounded in the very nature of the air, and have their reasons and causes declared in mathematics and optics. And as these resemblances are reflected back to the sight, so also are they sometimes to the hearing, as is manifest in echo. But there are many more secret arts than these, and such whereby anyone may, at a remarkable distance, hear and understand distinctly what another speaks or whispers. Stock apocalypse, morning. I think I wanted to go to chapter 6. Yeah, I think I want to go to the end of chapter 6. So I'm just going to keep going here for a bit. This is pretty interesting, though. Some interesting tidbits in there about the elements and some weird phenomena, it sounds like, what they believed back then. Probably seems very superstitious to us, but anyways, thanks for watching so far or listening. Chapter 4. Of compound or mixed bodies, in what manner they relate to the elements, and how the elements relate to the souls, senses, and dispositions of men. The next in order, after the four simple elements, are the four kinds of perfect bodies compounded of them, viz., metals, stones, plants, and animals. And although in the generation of each of these, all the elements combine together in the composition, yet every one of them follows and resembles one of the elements which is most predominant. For all stones, being earthy, are naturally heavy, and are so hardened with dryness that they cannot be melted. But metals are watery, and may be melted, which naturalists and chemists find to be true, viz., that they are composed or generated of a viscous, let me redo that. That they are composed or generated of a viscous water, or watery argent vive. That they are composed or generated of a viscous water, or watery argent vive. Plants have such an affinity with the air that unless they are out in it and receive its benefit, they neither. Let me redo that quickly. Get myself going here. Plants have such an affinity with the air that unless they are out in it and receive its benefit, they neither flourish nor increase. So also animals, as the poet finely expresses it, have in their natures a most fiery force, and also a spring from a celestial source. And fire is so natural to them, being extinguished, they soon die. Now, amongst stones, those that are dark and heavy are called earthy, those which are transparent of the watery element as crystal, beryl, and pearls, those which swim upon the water and are sponges, as the pumice stone, sponge, and sophos, are called airy, and those are attributed to the element of fire, out of which fire is extracted, or which are resolved into fire, as thunderstones, firestones, asbestos. Also amongst metals, lead and silver are earthy, quicksilver is watery, copper and tin airy, gold and iron fiery. In plants also the roots resemble earth, the leaves, water, flowers, the air, and seed. The fire by reason of their multiplying spirit. Besides, some are hot, some cold, some moist, others dry, borrowing their names from the qualities of the elements. Amongst animals also, some are, in comparison of others, earthy, because they live in the very bowels of the earth, as worms, moles, and many other reptiles. Others watery, as fish. Others which always abide in the air, therefore airy. Others again fiery, as salamanders, crickets, and such are of a fiery heat, as pigeons, ostriches, eagles, lions, panthers, etc., etc. Now, in the animals, the bones resemble earth, vital spirit, the fire, flesh, the air and humors, the water. And these humors also resemble the elements, viz., yellow color, the fire, the blood, the air, phlegm, the water, and black color, or melancholy, the earth. And lastly, in the soul itself, the understanding resembles the fire, reason, the air, imagination, the water, and the senses, the earth. And these senses, again, are divided amongst themselves according to the elements. For the sight is fiery because it, excuse me, and these senses, again, are divided amongst themselves according to the elements. For the sight is fiery because it cannot perceive without the help of fire and light. The hearing is airy, for a sound is made by the striking of the air. The smell and taste resemble water, without the moisture of which there is neither smell nor taste. And lastly, the feeling is wholly earthly, because it takes gross bodies for its object. The actions also and operations of man are governed by the elements. For the earth signifies a slow and firm motion, the water, fearfulness, sluggishness, and remissness in working. Air signifies cheerfulness and an amiable disposition, but fire a fierce, working, quick, susceptible disposition. The elements are, therefore, the first and original matter of all things, and all things are of and according to them, and they in and through all things diffuse their virtues. Chapter 5. That the elements are in the heavens, in the stars, in devils, angels, intelligences, and lastly, in God Himself. In the original and exemplary world, all things are in all. Let me just redo that quickly. In the original, I'll take a quick drink. In the original and exemplary world, all things are all in all. So also in this corporeal world. And the elements are not only in these inferior things, but are in the heavens, in stars, in devils, in angels, and likewise in God Himself, the maker and original example of all things. Now, it must be understood that in these inferior bodies, the elements are gross and corruptible. But in the heavens, they are, with their natures and virtues, after a celestial and more excellent manner than in sublunary things. For the firmness of the celestial earth is there without the grossness of water, and the agility of air without exceeding its bounds, the heat of fire without burning, only shining, giving light and life to all things by its celestial heat. Now, amongst the stars or planets, some are fiery as Mars, and the sun airy as Jupiter, and Venus watery as Saturn, and Mercury and earthy, such as inhabit the eighth orb, and the moon, by which many is accounted watery, seeing that as if it were earth, it attracts to itself the celestial waters, with which being imbibed it does, on account of its proximity to us, pour forth and communicate to our globe. There are likewise amongst the signs some fiery, some airy, some watery, and some earthy. The elements rule them also in the heavens, distributing to them these four threefold considerations of every element, according to their triplicities, viz., the beginning, middle, and end. Likewise, devils are distinguished according to the elements, for some are called earthy devils, others fiery, some airy, and others watery. Hence also those four infernal rivers, fiery phlegethon, airy coxitus, fiery. Uh, let me just Acheron, Acheron. Let me just check with my assistant on the cocytus. I should know that. Cocytus. What is it? Cocytus or cocytus? I think it's cocytus. 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 So funny, eh? They tell me that it does not appear in this book multiple times, or like it doesn't appear. Yes, it does appear in this book. It's in there. I don't know what version they're looking at. All right, here we go. Where was that? Cositus. Fiery flagellon, airy cositus, watery Styx, earthy acheron. Also, in the gospel, we read of comparisons of the elements as hell fire and eternal fire, into which the cursed shall be commanded to go, and in Revelations of a lake of fire. And Isaiah, speaking of the damned, says that the Lord will smite them with corrupt air. And in Job, they shall skip from the waters of the snow to the extremity of heat. And in the same, we read that the earth is dark and covered with the darkness of death and miserable darkness. And these elements are placed in the angels of heaven and the blessed intelligences. There is in them a stability of their essence, which is an earthy virtue, in which is the steadfast seat of God. By the psalmist, they are called waters, where he says, "Who ruleth the waters that are higher than the heavens?" Also in them, their subtle breath is air, and their love is shining fire. Hence, they are all called in Scripture the wings of the wind. And in another place, the psalmist speaks of them thus: Who makest angels thy spirits, and thy ministers a flaming fire. Also, according to the different orders of spirits or angels, some are fiery as seraphims, authorities and powers, earthy as cherubim, watery as thrones and archangels, airy as dominions and principalities. And do we not read of the original maker of all things, that the earth shall be opened and bring forth a Savior? Likewise, it is spoken of the same, that he shall be a fountain of living water, cleansing and regenerating, in the same Spirit breathing the breath of life, and the same according to Moses and Paul's testimony, a consuming fire. That the elements are, therefore, to be found everywhere and in all things after their manner, no man will to deny. Let me just redo that sentence. That the ele- Excuse me. That the elements are therefore to be found everywhere and in all things after their manner, no man will dare to deny. First, in these inferior bodies, feculent and gross, and in celestials more pure and clear, but in supercelestials living and in all respects blessed. Elements, therefore, in the exemplary world are ideas of things to be produced. In intelligences, they are distributed powers. In the heavens, they are virtues. And in inferior bodies are gross forms. All right. One more chapter, and then I'll stop for the day and start tomorrow with of the spirit of the world. That should be interesting. I'm enjoying this part here with the elements and stuff. Chapter 6, that the wisdom of God works by the medium of second causes, i.e., by the intelligences, by the heavens, elements, and celestial bodies, is proved beyond dispute in this chapter. It is to be noted that God, in the first place, is the beginning and end of all virtue. He gives the seal and I got that wrong, so I might as well redo it anyways. Then I made a mistake, so I had split up, or I shifted around end and beginning. Not that that really matters, but it is to be noted that God, in the first place, is the end and beginning of all virtue. He gives the seal of the ideas to his servants, the intelligences who, as faithful officers, sign all things entrusted to them with an ideal virtue, the heavens and stars as instruments disposing the matter, in the meanwhile for the receiving of these forms which reside in divine majesty and to be conveyed by stars. And the giver of forms distributes them by the ministry of his intelligences, which he has ordained as rulers and controllers over his works, to whom such a power is entrusted in things committed to them, that so all virtue in stones, herbs, metals, and all other things may come from the intelligences, the governors. Therefore, the form and virtue of things come first from the ideas, then from the ruling and governing intelligences, then from the aspects of the heavens disposing, and lastly, from the tempers of the elements disposed, answering the influences of the heavens by which the elements themselves are ordered or disposed. These kinds of operations, therefore, are performed in these inferior things by express forms, and in the heavens by disposing virtues, in intelligences by mediating rules, in the original cause by ideas and exemplary forms, all which must of necessity agree in the execution of the effect and virtue of everything. There is therefore a wonderful virtue and operation in every herb and stone, but greater in a star, beyond which, even from the governing intelligences, everything receives and obtains many things for itself, especially from the supreme cause, with whom all things mutually and exactly correspond, agreeing in a harmonious consent. Therefore, there is no other cause of the necessity of effects than the connection of all things with the first cause, and their correspondency with those divine patterns and eternal ideas, whence everything hath its determinate and particular place in the exemplary world, from whence it lives and receives its original being, and every virtue of herbs, stones, metals, animals, words, speeches, and all things that are of God are placed there. Now, the first cause, which is God, although he doth, by intelligences and the heavens, work upon these inferior things, does sometimes, these mediums being laid aside or their officiating being suspended, work those things immediately by himself, which works are then called miracles. But whereas secondary causes do, by the command and appointment of the first cause, necessarily act, and are necessitated to produce their effects, if God shall, notwithstanding, according to his pleasure, so discharge and suspend them that they shall wholly desist from the necessity of that command, then they are called the greatest miracles of God. For instance, the fire of the Chaldean furnace did not burn the children. The sun stood still at the command of Joshua and became retrograde one whole day. Also, at the prayer of Hezekiah, it went back 10 degrees. And when our Savior Christ was crucified, it became darkened, though at full moon. And the reason of these operations can be by no and the reason of these operations can by no rational discourse, no magic or science, occult or profound soever, be found out or understood, but are to be learned by divine oracles only. Footnotes. The foregoing chapter, if well considered, will open the intellect to a more easy comprehension of the magical science of nature, etc., and will facilitate in a wonderful degree our studies in these sublime mysteries. There we have it for today. Tomorrow I'll do the spirit world. What else after that? The seals and characters, perfumes, suffogations, vapors. So it gets into all that stuff. And then some celestial stuff. And then magic virtue of rings. Oh, that should be interesting. Maybe we'll find the one ring written about in there. So there we go. We're kind of making our way through book one. Thanks for being here, and thanks for watching and listening. You can always, do all that stuff, like and subscribe and everything, and check out our whole channel. There's all kinds of books that Darren's made into videos. Um, videos that not videos, but just with the words scrolling down and stuff. We're trying to make it a little bit more interactive. Interactive is not even the right word, just visual, I guess. So, and then all our stuff is on Spotify and Audible too. If anybody's listening or watching there, that's a really good way to help support us. So, thank you very much. I love you and see you tomorrow.